You ever been cut out of your own family like you never existed? That's what happened to me. They sold my grandmother's house, the one place that ever felt like home, without telling me a word. No call, no funeral invite, just silence. And when I came back years later, I wasn't looking for revenge. I was looking for something they thought they'd taken from me for good. I'm Isabella Sanchez, and this is the story of what happened when I stood on that porch again and made them face what they buried. You're watching Velvet Revenge. If stories like this hit close to home, tell me where you're watching from. And go ahead and hit subscribe. You'll want to hear the end of this. There she was, standing right where I used to bury time capsules as a kid, on the edge of the rosemary bush that once kissed the back porch of my grandmother's house. Only now, it wasn't hers. And it wasn't mine. Not yet. My Aunt Celia was thinner than I remembered. Not from age or stress. She wore her vanity like a silk scarf. Her hair, dyed the same rusty shade of auburn she'd had since I was 12, looked out of place in the Florida humidity. Her nails were still long, sharp, and nude pink, like always. The woman hadn't changed. Neither had the way she looked at me, like I was some weed that grew back no matter how many times she cut me down. She didn't recognize me at first. Or maybe she did, and just didn't know what to say. I didn't say anything either. I just stood there, holding the deed in my purse like a loaded weapon. The house was smaller than I remembered. Strange, isn't it? How time makes giants of things. The shutters sagged a little now. The roof tiles had darkened with age. But the archway above the front door still held the iron plaque my grandfather carved. Para siempre, forever. Celia finally spoke. Isabella? I gave her a soft smile, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. Hi, Tia. And for a second, just one breath of silence, everything in me wanted to wrap my arms around her and pretend we were still family. But the silence passed, and I remembered everything. I remembered the day they signed it away. I was 25 when she died. My grandmother. My favorite person in the world. I called her Abuela, though she hated the word. Makes me sound old, she'd say, brushing a silver curl behind her ear, always wearing that same gold necklace with the little opal drop. She was beauty and strength and Cuban sass, all rolled into one woman who could cook paella while cursing in 3 languages and still have time to remind you of your worth. She raised me mostly. My mother was always in and out of something. Rehab, a new man, a new meltdown. My father disappeared when I was 8. So Abuela took me in and made the world make sense. She used to tell me, Mija, when you have nothing else, you still have your name, and you better make it shine. But names mean nothing when no one calls them. When she passed, I expected grief. What I didn't expect was silence. No phone calls, no funeral invite, no reading of the will. Nothing. I found out she was gone from a Facebook post. A cousin I hadn't seen in 6 years uploaded a photo of the funeral program, tagged my aunt and uncle, and wrote something like, "We'll miss you always." That was it. No one called me. No one even told me she was in the hospital. 3 weeks later, I showed up in Coral Gables with a suitcase and a bouquet of orchids. The house was already sold. My name wasn't in the will. My aunt said it was what Abuela wanted, that I wasn't around enough at the end. She smiled as she said it. Smiled. She'd erased me. I was humiliated. I stood in that cul-de-sac with orchids wilting in my arms while she shut the door in my face. The home where I learned to dance, cry, cook, grow, was no longer mine. Just like that. I rented a hotel for one night and flew back to Atlanta the next morning. But something inside me snapped on that flight. A silence broke that had lived in me for years. They thought they'd buried me quietly. They didn't know I would rise. Quietly, too. The next 10 years were not a comeback. They were a transformation. I worked my way from receptionist to VP at a luxury real estate firm in Atlanta. I never used my last name on listings, just Isabella. I learned how the rich played their games. I learned what homes really meant to people. I learned that power isn't loud, it's strategic. I built everything alone. No loans, no inheritance, no handouts. And when I'd saved enough, more than enough, I started watching the old neighborhood. One day, a property alert pinged my phone. I saw the address and something in my chest cracked open. Para Siempre, my grandmother's house, listed as a foreclosure. Turns out, my cousin gambled half his savings into a restaurant that failed during COVID. My uncle mortgaged the house to help him, thinking the real estate market would bounce back in time. It didn't. Celia tried to save it, but by then the debt was bigger than the walls. The listing sat quietly for 36 days. No offers. I made mine on the 37th. In cash. Under a holding company. They didn't even know I was the buyer. Until now. Back in the present, Celia clutched the railing like it might protect her from what she already suspected. Her lips tightened. "Why are you here?" I stepped up onto the first stair. Eye level now. The same stair where I used to sit and tie my shoelaces before school. I tilted my head. "I think you already know." Her eyes widened slightly. Not from fear. From realization. From shame trying to rise and being swallowed just as fast. I didn't say anything else. I simply reached into my purse. Not the deed, just the keys. I held them up like a ribbon in a quiet war. I came home. And with that, I walked past her. Into my grandmother's house. She didn't follow. The scent of lemon cleaner and old wood hit me like a wave. And suddenly I was 10 again, hiding under the dining table with cookie crumbs on my fingers, giggling while Abuela swept the floor and pretended not to see me. But the illusion faded fast. The house was mostly empty. The soul of it had been stripped, curtains gone, furniture sold. But I didn't need any of that. The bones were still here. And so was I. I pressed my hand against the kitchen wall where I once marked my height with a pencil. The faint indent was still there. They hadn't even sanded it down. I exhaled. This was only the beginning. When I think of my childhood, I remember color. The canary yellow walls of the kitchen, the rust-red bougainvillea climbing the fence, the soft coral of Abuela's lipstick when she kissed my forehead every morning. Our home on Menendez Avenue wasn't big, but it was rich in warmth. People came and went like currents. Cousins staying the summer, tias with problems, uncles with hangovers. But I was the constant. I was her girl. Abuela had this way of commanding the room without raising her voice. "Isabella," she'd say, "never waste your beauty on people who forget your soul." I didn't understand it then. I just knew she made everything feel safe. Sacred, even. We'd drink café con leche in the mornings while the radio played old Celia Cruz songs in the background. She always braided my hair before school and tucked a folded napkin into my backpack with a little note. "Make good choices. Speak from your corazon. Be bold." My mother? She was the opposite of everything safe. Ana Sanchez was chaos with red lips and a perfume cloud you could smell before she entered the room. She showed up twice a year, drunk, apologetic, always leaving behind some new hole I had to patch up. But Abuela never let me grow bitter. "Your mama's fire, but you're the flame that warms, not burns." She gave me a story to belong to, a name that meant something, a place in the world. And in those years, I thought that was enough, until I started realizing how the others looked at me. Celia was the first to let the mask slip. She'd always been beautiful, polished, the kind of woman who threw brunches for people she hated just to prove she could. Her laugh was always a little louder when Abuela praised me. Her questions always came with edges. "Still reading those little books of yours?" she'd ask, sipping wine mid-afternoon. "That won't get you a job, mija. Or maybe if your mama had married someone with money, you'd have more than dreams." I thought she was just bitter. I didn't realize then that bitterness festers into strategy. When I was 17, Abuela started getting tired more often. She'd forget if she'd turned off the stove. Call me by my mother's name sometimes. But she waved it off, of course. "Just age, mija. Nothing fatal. Go live your life." And so I did. I got a scholarship to Emory. I left Coral Gables in a car held together with prayers and duct tape and cried the entire drive up to Atlanta. But I always called, every Friday, and every holiday. I came home with gifts and pictures and stories. Celia would be there, always too sweet, always so proud of me. But her compliments were dipped in syrup and sarcasm. "You're the golden one, huh? The little star. Atlanta looks good on you. Money changes people. I guess you're too busy for Sunday dinners now." But I ignored it. I told myself she was family. That family loves you in their own way. That was the first assumption I had to unlearn. Abuela still kept my room untouched. She once told me she'd sit on my bed when she missed me and pray. "God gave me one chance to do things right," she'd whisper. "And it was you." Those words carried me. Even when my job got hard, even when my heart got broken. She was my compass. When I was 24, I flew home for her birthday. I planned a big surprise. Flowers, a catered dinner, a photo album I'd spent months making. When I arrived, the house was filled with people. Balloons, laughter, salsa music. But no one had told me. I stood in the hallway like an outsider. Celia was standing by the kitchen island wearing a red dress and holding court like a queen. She spotted me and her smile thinned. "Oh, you made it. Then to the room? Isabella's here." Polite applause. No warmth. No welcome. And Abuela? She was in the living room, propped up on the couch, frailer than I remembered. Her eyes lit up when she saw me. "Mija," she breathed. "I thought you couldn't come." I hugged her tighter than I should have. She winced in pain. I pulled back, concerned. "Just arthritis," Celia chimed in from behind me. "She's fine." But her voice clipped the end of her sentence. Later that night, I caught her on the phone in the hallway, whispering, something about power of attorney and avoiding drama. I wanted to ask questions, but I didn't. Because family doesn't spy on family. Because I trusted them. That was the second assumption I had to lose. A week before graduation, I called Abuela to tell her I'd gotten a job offer. My dream position. She was thrilled, proud, her voice soft and shaky from age, but full of joy. "I knew you'd make your name shine," she said. "You always had more in you than this town." I told her I'd be back in June. I'd take her to the beach, get her out of the house, maybe take her on one of those day cruises. She laughed. But when June came, she didn't answer the phone. Not once. I called Celia. "She's resting," she said. Another day. "She's sleeping." Another. "She's not well, Isabella. She asked not to be disturbed." I flew down. Celia wasn't home. A neighbor said they hadn't seen Abuela in weeks. When I called again, Celia told me I was being dramatic and disrespectful. "She has enough to worry about," she snapped. "She doesn't need your guilt trips." The guilt worked. I flew back to Atlanta and told myself I'd wait for her to call me. She never did. 3 weeks later, I saw the funeral post. A cousin tagging Celia in a group photo, everyone smiling in black. I stared at it for hours. I wasn't in it. I hadn't even known she was dying. The house was already gone when I returned. Celia met me at the door with cold eyes and a casual shrug. "Abuela left everything to the family," she said. "You were busy. You left." I begged her to show me the will. She said it was private. I asked for 5 minutes to walk through the house. She said it was no longer my home. And then, she shut the door. No hug. No condolence. Just the lock clicking behind me like a final word. That night, I sat on the curb outside the house and cried for the first time in years. Not just for Abuela, but for the girl I'd been, the one who believed that love protected you, that family meant belonging. I realized then, love without power is decoration, and family without loyalty is just blood. But what they took from me wasn't just a home. It was my place in the story. The roots I thought were mine, the memory of a woman who made me whole. They erased me like I'd never been part of it, like my name didn't belong on the mailbox anymore. And that's when I made a promise, not for revenge, but to restore the name she gave me, to return as more than they ever expected, to come back as someone they couldn't ignore. Grief doesn't always arrive like thunder. Sometimes it's quiet, slick, cruel. It enters through the seams, not the front door. And by the time you realize it's there, it's already rearranged everything inside you. The day after I saw the Facebook post, I called Celia again. This time, I didn't care about politeness. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" I asked, my voice shaking. "You haven't been around," she said, calm as ever. "We didn't think you'd want the drama." I felt like I'd swallowed glass. "She was my grandmother. You don't get to decide." "She was your grandmother," she said sharply, "but she didn't want you involved at the end. She made that clear." That sentence sliced through me. She made that clear. As if love has an expiration date. As if presence at a deathbed is earned only through convenience. I hung up without another word. The next morning I booked a flight. Not because I had a plan, but because I couldn't sit still knowing she was gone. And I hadn't said goodbye. I told myself maybe I could find closure. Maybe I could at least stand in front of her grave. I didn't even know where she was buried. When I got to Coral Gables, the sun was blinding. The heat stuck to my skin like regret. I took a cab straight to Menendez Avenue. My hands were clenched the entire ride. I didn't even know what I'd say when I saw them. I just knew I had to look someone in the face. The house looked the same, but it didn't feel the same. It looked like a memory photoshopped into a lie. The hibiscus bush by the porch was gone. The wind chimes were silent. The curtains had changed. Celia opened the door after the third knock. Her expression was tight, but not surprised. "You shouldn't be here." "I want answers," I said. "Now." She stepped aside just enough to block me from entering. "There's nothing for you here." "Where is she buried?" I asked. My voice cracked. Celia paused. "Green Lawn, Lot 22B, but don't go today. It's private." "She's dead. There's no privacy left," I snapped. Celia's eyes narrowed. Then she said something I'll never forget. "She asked that you not be contacted. You didn't make the cut, Isabella. Didn't make the cut, like I was a line item on a spreadsheet, like love could be edited out." That night, I broke down in a hotel bathroom with the lights off, the kind of collapse where you don't even recognize the sound of your own crying. I curled up on the cold tile floor, shaking, the air too thick to swallow. I didn't know who I was. I wasn't a granddaughter, wasn't a daughter, wasn't part of the story anymore. And worst of all, a tiny, ugly part of me wondered if Celia was right. Maybe I had failed her. Maybe I should have called more. Maybe I should have visited sooner. Grief turns your memories against you. I replayed every missed call, every late text, every moment I let life get in the way of love, and then came the shame. Then the rage, one after the other, like waves crashing against my chest. The next morning I went to Greenlawn alone. I found her grave by accident. Lot 22B wasn't marked. No headstone, just a paper sign pushed into the dirt that said, "Reserved." I stared at it for a long time. I waited for the grief to rise again, but what came instead was fury. She deserved more. And so did I. I started calling lawyers that afternoon. I wanted to see the will. I wanted proof. I needed to know if it was true. If she really chose to erase me. Every call hit a wall. "I'm sorry, we can't disclose that. You'd have to be listed as a beneficiary. Do you have power of attorney?" I didn't have anything. Not even answers. And then, one of the junior associates from a firm in Brickell slipped. She thought I was someone else on the phone. I believe the property was transferred to Celia's name just a few weeks before her mother's death. Unusual timing, but the documents were notarized. I stopped breathing. "What documents?" I asked. Pause. "I'm sorry, who did you say you were again?" Click. That was the moment the truth became unbearable. She forged it, or bullied her into it. Abuela never would have given her the house. Not like that. Not while I was still breathing. It wasn't about the house. It was about being written out of the story I helped build. It was theft, not just of property, but of love, memory, legacy, and I had nothing to fight back with. No voice in court, no family backing me, no receipts. I was grieving a woman who loved me like a daughter, and watching that love be weaponized against me. For weeks, I spiraled. Back in Atlanta, I'd wake up at 3 a.m., choking on dreams. I'd scroll through old texts, old voicemails, clinging to every "I love you, mija," like it might rewrite the ending. I stopped showing up to work on time. I canceled dinner plans. I ignored calls from friends. My world shrank to a screen, and a silence I couldn't name. I was frozen in place, wanting revenge, wanting to forget, wanting to believe it hadn't happened. But life kept moving. The world doesn't stop just because your history collapses. One night, I drove aimlessly through the city until I found myself outside a luxury listing I'd worked on 6 months earlier. A modern estate with steel beams and cascading windows. I remembered the seller, an old widow who wanted to downsize. I'd helped her through it, handheld her through the paperwork, brought her flowers the day she signed. That woman had cried and told me, "You're the only one who made me feel like this mattered." And it hit me. That's what I do. That's what I gave people. Dignity. I didn't have a family, but I had that. I had a name, and I knew how to make it shine. Grief didn't leave. It never does. But clarity came in its place. They stole something sacred, but they couldn't keep it sacred because they didn't know what to do with it. They sold the house. They mortgaged the past. They traded memory for money. But me? I remembered every tile, every smell, every story. And I realized I didn't have to erase them. I just had to outlive them in legacy. It started small. I took on more listings, worked longer hours, saved every cent. And I made a promise. The next time I walked through that front door, I'd have the keys. Not as a daughter, not as a victim, but as the owner. There's a moment after betrayal that no one warns you about. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's the moment you wake up, stare at the ceiling, and realize you don't recognize your own life. Not the room, not the body, not the silence. Just a vague hum under your skin, like your soul's been evicted and forgot to leave a forwarding address. I floated through that year in a daze. I kept the job, barely. I dressed well, smiled on cue, signed papers, shook hands. But inside, I was drifting, like I'd been locked out of some house inside myself. I stopped calling friends, stopped returning texts. Everyone said, "You look amazing," but no one knew I hadn't eaten a full meal in weeks. The silence of being unseen is louder than heartbreak. I started drinking, just enough to dull the noise. A glass of wine with dinner, then a second, then just wine, no dinner. At night, I'd scroll Zillow listings like they were old love letters. Looking at Coral Gables homes I couldn't afford yet, pretending I was ready, pretending I was building toward something. But I wasn't building. I was numbing. One night, I messaged a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. Claudia. We used to be close as kids, before everything splintered. I don't know why I reached out. Maybe I wanted to believe someone remembered me too. She replied the next day, "Hey, stranger, let's catch up." It felt like air in a suffocating room. We talked, laughed, shared old memories. She told me Celia wasn't doing well. The house stuff was messy. People did things they regret. And for the first time in months, I thought maybe I wasn't crazy. Maybe someone saw what happened. She invited me to a family BBQ in Miami the next month. Said it could be a reset. I didn't want to go, but a part of me still ached for belonging, for evidence that I mattered. I bought a dress, blue silk, modest, clean, like I was trying to prove something. I flew in, rented a car, rehearsed how I'd say hello without sounding bitter. When I walked into that backyard, people turned. They smiled, politely, and then I saw Celia, sitting at the table, laughing with a drink in her hand. Her voice loud, her gestures grand. When her eyes met mine, something flickered. Recognition, maybe. Then indifference. No one stood. No one cheered. No one even said, "We missed you." Cousins smiled tight smiles. One aunt hugged me like a stranger. A few whispered in corners. I walked to the food table. Claudia joined me, eyes a little nervous. "I'm glad you came," she said. "I don't think anyone else is," I replied. She looked down. "People are complicated. People are cruel," I said. I left after 47 minutes, drove to the beach, sat on the sand in that silk dress, barefoot, watching the tide erase every footprint in front of me. And I cried. That was the moment I let the dream die. The dream that they'd remember me. That they'd come around. That I'd be welcomed back into the fold like some prodigal daughter. Closure doesn't come from apologies. It comes from surrender. And that night, I buried the last of that hope in the sand. Back in Atlanta, I hit bottom. I missed deadlines. I blew up on a client. My boss pulled me into his office and said, "You either take a break or you break." So I did something I swore I never would. I made a therapy appointment. Her name was Dr. Ellen Berman. Late 50s. Calm voice. Kind, but not soft. She didn't ask me what was wrong. She asked me where it hurt. And I told her. Everything. The abandonment. The silence. The home. The funeral. The wine. The numbness. Week after week, I peeled back layers I didn't know were still attached. She said, "You keep asking what they took. But I think the better question is, what did you give away long before they had a chance to steal it?" It stunned me. I didn't answer for 3 sessions. But when I finally did, I said, my sense of worth. I gave it away. Every time I believed they were right about me. She nodded. Then it's time to take it back. But not for them. For you. Recovery wasn't beautiful. It was awkward. Messy. Uneven. I stopped drinking. Started running again. I changed my apartment layout. Got rid of the wine glasses. Bought plants. Killed half of them. Bought more. I called old friends. Some answered. Some didn't. I forgave the ones who vanished when I needed them most. Because I'd vanished too, in my own way. Slowly, I started saying my name out loud again, not just signing it. Isabella Sanchez. The girl with the braided hair. The one who laughed with Abuela in the kitchen. The one who survived. Not the abandoned one. Not the erased one. Me. 6 months later, I was attending a women's real estate summit in Austin. I was sitting in the back row, notebook in hand, when a speaker took the stage. Her name was Loretta, mid-60s, gray curls, emerald blazer, sharp wit. She was talking about legacy, of all things. She said, "Real estate isn't just about land, it's about story. When a woman owns land, she doesn't just change her wealth, she reclaims her place in the world." It hit me like lightning. I stayed after the session. We talked. She asked me what my biggest why was. I told her the truth. I lost a house that held my entire identity. I want to help women buy theirs before they lose who they are. She stared at me for a long moment, then smiled. "You don't need to become someone new. You just need to remember who you were before they made you forget." I returned to Atlanta and rebranded my entire business. New logo, new name, Para Siempre Properties. For legacy, for women, for me. I started building again, not out of vengeance, out of value. I coached first-time buyers, held workshops, mentored interns, and each time I handed over a key, I imagined Abuela's voice in my ear. "Make your name shine, mija." Then, the listing appeared. Late one night, I got a notification on a search I hadn't checked in months. Coral Gables, 3-bed, 2-bath, Menendez Avenue, my grandmother's house, foreclosure, needs renovation, no offers, motivated seller. I stared at the screen for nearly 10 minutes before I clicked the link. It was stripped down. Empty. Sad. But the bones were there, and the story wasn't over. I picked up the phone, called Loretta. She said, You ready to come full circle? I said, I already have. There's a kind of power in rebuilding quietly. No announcement, no applause, just the sound of your own breath steadying again. The day the keys to Abuela's house arrived, I didn't cry. I thought I would. I thought the moment would collapse me. But it didn't. I just stood there, on my balcony in Atlanta, the city skyline gold behind me, holding the envelope in both hands like it contained scripture. And in a way, it did. I whispered to myself, you came back. Not to them. To you. I didn't move in right away. I made a plan. A slow one. Intentional. I flew to Coral Gables once a month to oversee renovations. I kept it under my LLC, Para Siempre Holdings. No public name, no social trail. The contractors didn't even know the history. To them, it was just another flip. But to me, it was resurrection. Every new tile I chose, I remembered the feel of the old ones beneath my bare feet as a child. Every light fixture I installed, I saw Abuela in her robe, switching off lamps at night. It was sacred work. Not revenge, not yet. Just the quiet restoration of something holy. Back in Atlanta, things were blooming. My agency went from boutique to buzzing. 3 new agents joined within 6 months. We built a reputation for emotional intelligence, not just sales. I trained them to listen, not sell. Because people don't buy homes. They buy hope. I got invited to speak at real estate events. I shared my story, selectively. Not about the betrayal, about legacy, about how women carry land differently. And one day, a letter arrived in our office mailbox. A woman named Simone had bought her first home through our agency. In her note, she wrote, I used to think people like me didn't deserve something permanent. But you made me believe I could claim space, too. You didn't just sell me a house. You gave me a place in the world. I held that letter like oxygen. I had once begged for a place at a table that had no seat for me. Now I was building the table from scratch. Healing is strange. It doesn't announce itself. It shows up in small moments. When your laugh comes easy again. When your hands don't tremble during silence. When you don't rehearse conversations with people who already let you go. It crept into me like morning light. I started cooking again. Abuela's arroz con pollo, fresh cilantro, garlic. The smell alone could undo me. But I cooked it anyway. One night, I brought leftovers to my neighbor, a photographer named Leela. She'd just moved in down the hall, alone with a stack of framed canvases and a cat named Mercury. We sat on my floor and ate straight from the pot. She told me about a project she was shooting, portraits of women who rebuilt after loss. I laughed and said, That's everyone. She said, Not everyone rebuilds well. She started coming by every Thursday. Sometimes we'd talk about business. Sometimes we'd just sit and be quiet. And for the first time in years, I let someone see the parts of me I'd hidden. Not the strong parts, the tender ones. She never asked for more than I offered. Never filled silence with pity or questions. She just stayed. And in that, I found something new. Not love exactly, but the possibility of it, which sometimes is even more sacred. By year's end, the Coral Gables house was nearly done. White stucco restored, tile roof repainted, garden replanted. The kitchen had new appliances, but the same layout. The same window over the sink that looked out to the lemon tree. I kept the plaque above the door, Para Siempre. One morning, while walking the garden with the contractor, he mentioned something offhand. There's been a lot of foot traffic in the neighborhood. A couple locals passed by asking if the property was still owned by the family. Sounded like they used to live here. I nodded slowly. That was the first time it really hit me. They didn't know I was back. They didn't know I was the one who had saved it. The one who held the deed now. I hadn't planned to tell them. But the universe has a way of circling, especially when you stand still and strong enough to let the wind come to you. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived at the Coral Gables address, forwarded through the builder. It was addressed to the current owner. I opened it on my porch, barefoot, tea in hand. It was from Celia, handwritten, curved script, lavender ink. If this reaches you, I hope you're caring for the house with grace. It meant a lot to my mother. It deserves respect. It holds history. No apology, no signature, just a note from someone who hadn't changed. But the irony? She didn't even know who she was writing to. I folded it neatly, tucked it inside a kitchen drawer, and in that moment, I understood something. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about completion, about becoming the kind of woman who could hold silence like power. But still, the wind was shifting. The air in Coral Gables felt thick with unfinished things, and deep in my gut, I knew something was coming. It happened on a Sunday. The garden was blooming again. Soft lavender along the fence, wild jasmine curling near the porch. The lemon tree was bearing fruit, and I had just finished sweeping the front steps when I heard voices, familiar ones. I looked up, Celia and Claudia beside her, walking slowly like they weren't sure they should be. They hadn't seen me yet. I didn't move. Celia looked older, not just aged, weathered. Her walk carried less certainty. Her signature sunglasses hung from a chain around her neck. Her hair, still dyed auburn, looked tired against the sun. They paused at the gate. She squinted at the new paint, at the garden, at the house she thought she'd never see again. Claudia murmured something, and that's when Celia spotted me, standing in the shade of the archway, the broom in one hand, the other resting on the doorframe. No makeup, no mask, just me. Her breath caught. I watched it happen. The recognition, the recalibration. Her spine straightened. Her expression hardened. Old habits. Old armor. "Isabella?" she asked, as if it could be anyone else. I said nothing. She stepped forward, just enough to feel like she still had control. "I didn't know you were here." I tilted my head. Let her sit in the weight of it. "Seems there's a lot you didn't know." Her eyes flicked to the front door, to the porch swing, to the brass handle she used to polish with vinegar and salt. "You bought it?" Silence. Then I nodded once. Slow, controlled. "Yes." She stared at me like I was a ghost. Or worse, an echo. Like she could see herself in me and hated what stared back. "You always were dramatic," she muttered. I stepped down one stair, still calm. "Funny. I learned it from you." Her mouth pressed into a thin line. Claudia hovered behind her, eyes darting. The tension between them felt like a secret about to burst. "I didn't come here to fight," Celia said finally. "Good," I replied, "because I stopped fighting for you a long time ago." She glanced around, trying to recover ground. "This house, it wasn't just yours, you know. It was family." I raised an eyebrow. "And yet somehow, you decided who counted." Celia flinched, just slightly. "You were gone," she said. "You left. You made your choices." I stepped down the last stair. Now we stood eye to eye. "You don't get to rewrite the past just because it fits your guilt." Her eyes flashed. "You don't know what she said at the end." "You're right," I said. "Because you never let me hear it." And that was the moment her mask cracked. Just a flicker in her face, the slip of her pride. The part of her that knew what she'd done and how far she'd gone to bury it. Claudia looked away. I didn't move, didn't blink, didn't fill the silence. I let it bloom, let it press into the space between us like gravity. Then I said the line, quiet, final, surgical. "You didn't win. You just made sure no one else could." Her breath hitched. The silence that followed was so heavy I could feel the garden still for it. The wind paused. The air thickened. She swallowed hard. And that's when I saw it. The reflection. Not of me in her, but of her in me. What she could have been. What she wasn't. She saw the grace, the dignity, the strength that doesn't beg or plead or scream. She saw what it looks like when someone loses everything and rises without bitterness. She couldn't stand it. "I hope it was worth it," she said, voice trembling. "It was," I replied, voice steady. "Every broken piece of it." She turned without another word. Claudia lingered. Her eyes were wet. "I didn't know how deep it went," she whispered. I nodded. "Now you do." She opened her mouth, then closed it, then followed Celia out the gate. I stayed there, still, whole, rooted. I didn't chase, didn't look back. The front door creaked behind me in the breeze. I walked inside and let the silence close like a curtain. I stayed in Coral Gables through the spring. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to feel what still lived in the bones of that house. I wanted to hear the wind through the lemon tree and remember how it sounded when I was 8. I wanted to wake to the light that used to dance across my bedroom ceiling at sunrise. I kept the kitchen nearly the same. Just new tiles, a deeper sink, softer light. But the layout stayed. The window still faced the garden. And every morning I'd stand there with a cup of tea, barefoot, watching the world begin again. That's what healing is, really. 1,000 small mornings that whisper, "You're allowed to begin again, too." One afternoon, I found an old notebook in a dusty box from Atlanta. The leather cover was cracked, the pages yellowed at the edges. It was filled with letters I never sent. To Celia, to my mother, to Abuela. I sat on the porch swing, flipping through them slowly. Some angry, some broken. One just said, "I miss you. Why didn't you fight for me?" I read them all. Then I tore out the pages, one by one, folded them into squares, and placed them in a clay bowl. At sunset, I burned them, watched the flames curl each letter into ash, not out of hate, out of release. Some words aren't meant to be delivered, they're meant to be carried, then set down. People in the neighborhood started noticing I was there. Mrs. Delgado from 2 doors down brought over mangoes and said, "It's good to see someone in the house who remembers how it used to breathe." A boy named Leo asked if he could mow my lawn for $5. I gave him 10. Neighbors waved again. Children rode bikes past the front gate. The block began to feel like home again. Not a memory, a present. Lila came down to visit in May. She walked through the house slowly, fingertips brushing the walls like she was touching a living thing. She turned to me in the living room and said, "It feels like you." And for once, I believed her. We sat under the lemon tree with drinks and music and the soft hum of evening birds. And she said something I'll never forget. "You didn't just reclaim the house. You reclaimed the version of you they tried to bury." I didn't go to Celia's house again. Didn't call. Didn't need to. I heard through Claudia, weeks later, that she wasn't doing well, financially, emotionally, that she told people she did what she thought was right at the time. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel pity. I just felt done. That's the thing about peace. It's not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It just arrives one morning, sits beside you, and says, "You don't have to carry this anymore." I thought about selling the house again, using the equity, investing elsewhere. But every time I packed a box, something stopped me. So I left it mostly empty. Just a few pieces of furniture, a shelf of books, a photo of Abuela in the hallway, young, laughing, holding me in her arms. It didn't need to be filled to feel full. It was a place I could return to, a symbol, a promise I kept. My flight back to Atlanta was early. I stood on the porch at sunrise, suitcase beside me, waiting for the car. The sky was watercolor, pinks, oranges, soft blue. Birdsong in the trees. I reached into my bag, pulled out a single envelope, and walked to the mailbox. No return address, no name on the outside, just one line on the card inside. "We don't get to choose what we lose, but we can choose what we become after." I slid it into the box, lifted the red flag, and turned toward the car. The driver asked if I was ready. I smiled. I am now. This was Velvet Revenge. If the story moved you, hit subscribe. We're just getting started.